Some of you may recognise the title, which has been adapted from Maslow, What a Man Can Be, He Must Be. So I've personalised it into people rather than men and added should, although must would be just as good here, I think. And I've gone very much from a wide base to a specific one school exploration, which means it has lots of limitations, but also I would like to think it has a depth of humanity. I'll leave you to decide. The background to this research, it's very important that I share this with you because the work that I've done is based upon anomalies that arose from the previous research. The original research I was working on with Professor Richard Hatcher, whom some of you may well have heard of, very well known in his field. And we were looking at work experience placements of secondary school students and exploring whether work experience widened horizons or actually reproduced social inequality. And what we did was we looked at the distribution of students to placements with particular emphasis on distribution by social class. And we also looked at the processes utilised by schools in allocating placements. That's very important because if you imagine if you have an independent or a grammar school and they say to their students, find your own placements, well, if their parents are judges, doctors, etc., finding their own placement is not particularly difficult. But if you're in a low socioeconomic status school and your parents are either unemployed or work in factories, etc., for you to aspire to finding a professional placement is nigh impossible. So that was why that was one of the important areas. Just briefly to share with you the background to the original research, we worked with 5 schools based in the West Midlands. You can see it's reasonably large scale in as much as we worked with 1,000 students through questionnaires and 100 interviews with pupils and obviously interviews with staff at schools. When we did this research, we called our schools Avon, Bedford, Cumbria, Devon and Essex, which was brilliant, except that when I homed in on Essex School, it appeared that the school was in Essex. And at the moment, some of you may have been listening to a programme called Educating Essex. And may I stress, this has got nothing to do with Essex and nothing to do with that programme. It happens to be a school in the West Midlands. And boy, do I wish we'd actually had different names for our schools now. However, the one school, Avon, was selective by ability, and the other 4 were comprehensive schools. We did actually use free school meals. I was interested when you asked that. Although it's a proxy indicator, it was quite a useful one for us. And so what we were able to do was to categorise the schools as high SES, Avon, middle SES, Bedford and Cumbria, and low SES, Devon and Essex. The key findings from the 2008 study was that work placements do tend to powerfully reflect and reproduce patterns of social inequality rather than widen horizons. 4 of the schools actually adopted quite a hands-off approach to their work experience programme. And in some cases, this actually was to the point that go out, I don't really mind what you do, if it bores you witless, fine, but I haven't got time to find good placements for 156 students. And you have the quote there from the teacher at Avon, which of course was high SES. So telling his students to go out and find meant that they were reporting back about having lunch with the judge and going out to all sorts of fascinating places. In comparison with Devon School, low SES, where one girl said to me, I walked out of my placement when they asked me to clean the toilets for the 3rd time in a week. And you have quite a contrast there. Now, Essex was found to have a distinctive approach. Its pupils had far more school support and direction and far less independent choice than other schools. So, why am I doing this research? When I looked at the data for all 5 schools, Essex was unusual on 2 counts. One I've mentioned, it was very directive. But secondly, it had higher professional placements than one would have expected for a low SES school. And these were the intriguing anomalies which provided the stimulus for me undertaking this piece of small-scale research. I think I felt as if I needed to explain to you why I was researching work experience. And then I listened to James and I thought, well, you've been told why from what he said. So he actually did a lot for me there, and thank you. There are various comments, obviously, about this. I mean, Foskett et al. Talk about work experience being an axial point in decision-making, and certainly from the point of view of the students I've worked with, this comes over very strongly. Now, at the time of this research, schools were expected, they had a statutory requirement to provide work-based learning, and it usually takes place between 14 to 16, i.e. Key Stage 4. And DFE recommend that schools are sensitive to ensuring that their students do not feel uncomfortable in their placement, but that they should nonetheless bear in mind how far they should allow free choice. And those 2 things are quite important. I actually shared this with the head teacher at Essex School, and her response was really forthright. Comfortable? I don't want them to be comfortable. I want them out of their comfort zone. Otherwise, this here is it for them. And so that was the real dynamism in the way that she wanted to broaden horizons. And then when I also asked her about the school's interventionist stance, she talked so much about being in loco parentis in the truest sense of that description. And I love the bit where she says, our parents are not able or cognizant enough to play the game. So it's up to us. We do it for them and with them, and try to show them a different part of life, a different way that they can move forward. So to set Essex, as opposed to Essex, in context, it's an inner city school in the West Midlands. Catchment area is one of the most socially and economically disadvantaged in the country. The unemployment rate in the city is 12.5. It's 5.5% across the UK. In the suburb in which Essex is located, it's 27.8% unemployment. In 2010, which was when I started the research, free school meals were at 66%. When I mentioned this to the head, she said, oh, it's nearer 72 now. According to figures for January 2011, the percentage of pupils with English as a second language is 86%, and you can see there the predominant ethnic makeup of the school. Interesting to have a look at their exam results. In 2000, only 15% were actually gaining 5 or more A star to C grades at GCSE. By 2011, they've lifted this to 82%. Now, the Wolf report, which we've already mentioned, actually stresses that English and maths are so important for young people's education and their prospects in employment. And she comments that less than 50% of students actually achieve this at the end of Key Stage 4. Now, Essex School has 86% of students with English as their second language, and yet they are above average, gaining 53%, 5 or more A to C grades in English and maths, plus 3 others. And that really was quite telling for me. Okay, the research details. This is very small scale. I'm working with the staff at the school. 2 members of staff worked with me, and I also talked to 36 Year 12 students about their work experience in Year 11. I also had additional data from the schools, which is where I got a lot of my statistical data, and obviously other staff, as things came up and I had more questions, they also helped. And you've seen a couple of quotes from the head, so you know I spoke with her. Okay, the work experience staff, really Sian is it. And she said to me that when she goes out to employers, they call her the persuasive one. I would call her the Rottweiler, because honestly, I wouldn't say no to Sian. And it's like a military campaign when she gets started on work experience. And I have stressed quality work experience, and I will come back to that in a minute. Her colleague says they don't stand a chance. If they say they'll take one, she'll ask for two. If they say they won't take any, she'll say, but you took people last year, and so on. And I actually said to her, does your heart sink if you actually get this letter back saying, sorry, we can't take anyone this year? And she said, no, because I don't accept it. I'll just keep going till they change their mind. And that was what she was like, a real, as I say, a real Rottweiler. So I mentioned quality placement. To the head, a quality placement has to be one where students are encouraged to look beyond the horizons of their neighbourhood. For Sian, quality also resides in what they do on placement. Now, in our previous research in 2008, we had examples of where a student from Devon School, low SES, and a student from Avon School, the high SES, were both at the same hospital. The high SES student was working with the doctors, going around getting very actively involved in all things medical. The Devon student was working in the kitchens, assisting with probably washing up. You can see how Sian feels. She actually talks with employers about what she wants for her students. And you have the example there, even with one lad carrying out a research project, which I thought was fantastic. Don't know about the antiemetics. Anyway, distribution of placements. Once again, we have this situation where Sian is achieving more than you would expect for a low SES school in terms of professional placements. 26%, 42. I give you examples there about medical, pharmaceutical, etc. 21% were in educational institutions. Now, arguably, some of those would have been classed as professional as well, but I had insufficient data to know exactly what they were doing. Some did say to me they were helping to prepare lessons. They were actually teaching students. So some of that 20% maybe could well be shifted upwards. Quite a lot in retail, and the remaining were a little too varied for me to start to do any real statistical analysis. I then spoke with the students, spoke with some of them and did questionnaires, and there were 4 key questions. The first one was, who found your placement? And as you can see, the overwhelming majority say the school found it for me. Very few say I actually found it by myself. Now, to me, these confirm the continued interventionist stance of Essex School. However, Sian tells me it's very much the pupil's choice. So what's happening? Well, there is a subtlety about it to me. The directive stance is there because the quality of the placement is what they direct. They look for quality placements. So yes, the students have choice, but not of a dead-end placement where they spend 2 weeks absolutely bored. So that was the thing that she was starting to work on, to really encourage students to aim high, to believe that they could look at these types of jobs. What did you actually do on placement? Another really important factor. I've given you an example of Devon School contrasting with Avon. Here are the sorts of comments that in the 2008 research I was getting only from the grammar school. They were treated like colleagues. They felt they played an active role. They were a real member of staff, not stacking shoes, etc., but actually really doing things. A lot of them talked about work shadowing, which helped them to understand more about the job. And there was a degree of mentoring in there as well. And there were only 9% who talked about things like making the tea. And I've given you there a comment from a student, Mayham, and I think that shows you very clearly what she got from her placement. Okay, so far greater expectations, aspirations are higher. It's made a big difference. The third one was, what are the benefits of your work experience placement? And these were the key responses. I think what really came out for me here was they're getting this, what Bradford and Hay call psychological capital. They believe they can interact with these people whom they don't usually meet in their day-to-day lives. They're more confident about speaking. They can work with people they don't know in environments which are unfamiliar. They're far more confident generally. They have far greater sense of responsibility, certainly in the jobs some of them were doing. I wasn't too sure about the idea of a student giving injections. I'm not too good with injections, and the thought that she was doing that, maybe they just showed her how to, I'm not sure. The other one I really liked here was widening their ideas about the types of jobs. So there's the horizon widening, and I thought that was really important. And the fourth one was looking at influence. What influence did the work experience have on you? A lot felt it made them really want to work a lot harder. Ideas about work experience widening, influencing their decision about university, that maybe it would be for them. And 50% actually said it had given them the confidence to think about a career they never thought they could do. And I thought that was really special. There's a marked contrast between the work experience placements that the students undertake and the employment background of their family. And I think this is best just let you hear the students speak. Okay. I love the one in the council offices, which could have been deadly boring, but attend meetings, give my opinion. What a wonderful experience for that young person. So, summarising, the data show that the number of professional placements has increased considerably from 2008. Many are now intending to go to university, and many are talking in terms of their options, their eyes having been widened to what they believe they could now do and be. So, the research confirms the marked directive stance, but there is a subtlety to it, and it's linked to the quality of the placements. And furthermore, it's very, very evident that the programme forms just one small part of what Essex School is doing to enhance the student's psychological capital. So how do they do it? Well, if only it were that easy to come out with a formula. Amazingly committed staff, extremely low staff turnover. I had all the figures for this, which is in the paper, and the person I spoke to said, well, 1%, if that, you know, really, there is no staff turnover. The ethos of achievement, high expectations, strong relationships with parents, the local community and employers, and this real stress on this interventionist approach. And I've just reminded you what the head said before. We have to be the parent for our pupils. Our directing them shows them that different side of life. And my last comment, because I'm very conscious that I have employers here, and so far you're implicit in the success, but I haven't explicitly celebrated the role that employers have played. In our earlier research, there was a belief amongst certain members of staff that some employers preferred to take grammar school pupils. And you have a comment there from a middle SES school. My comment to this, well, I think it's a little unfair on the employers, because these jobs were being achieved through parental social capital. And it was the parents who were finding these jobs because a friend of theirs at the golf club or somebody they knew through their own work could get that placement. So I felt it was a little unfair on the employers. You also have a comment from the high SES school saying, well, maybe they just think our kids cope better. Perhaps they think that lower SES pupils won't have that confidence to be able to do this. Now, this clearly isn't the case for Essex pupils, and I'd love to find out the other side now, to actually explore the employer story. So maybe that's my next piece of research. Thank you.